Hello, my name is Lacey Hester, and I am going to be presenting on the vulnerability assessment of my partner, Alfonce. So in overview, I will be going over first the checklist of required services, the vulnerability ranking scale that I used on the security issues I found, and then I will be going over the actual security issues that I found for these specific services that are listed right here: HTTPS, POP3, SMTP, IMAP, Samba, DNS, Active Directory or AD, database, and SSH. So I'll just give you a second to look over this. Basically, this is just listing all of the specific services that are for the Windows and then the Linux. Okay, and then this is the vulnerability scale or ranking scale that I used for the security issues. As you can see, it's going from critical to informational. Critical is ratings that are used for vulnerabilities that can be remotely exploited. High is those that which, if compromised, could compromise the availability, confidentiality, or integrity of a user's data. Medium are vulnerabilities that are mitigated to a substantial degree. And then low are those that are very difficult to exploit, or if they were to be compromised, it would just be very minimal. And that's why they'd be given a low rating. And then the informational ones are more just suggestions to further harden services. They're not necessarily at risk for your system, but it's always best to just always be prepared and have things protected and hardened. So the first thing I'm going to go over is the HTTPS for Linux. As you can see, I found 4 vulnerabilities. All 4 are related to SSL. The first is the SSL self-signed certificate. The certificate chain is not currently signed by a certificate authority that's recognized by this particular service. So basically, in the situation, if the remote host were to be a public host within production, the SSL would be nullified, and the possible threat of man-in-the-middle attack would be at a higher risk. In order to combat against that, it's recommended to purchase or generate a proper certificate for the service. The next one is a certificate can't be trusted. Because it's not signed by a publicly known authority, that's why this vulnerability is popping up. The top of the certificate, it's not descended from a publicly known authority, so therefore it breaks the chain and causes the entire certificate to not be trusted. If there's any break within the chain whatsoever, it'll make it difficult for the identity and authentic, or just the identity of a web server to be verified. And again, it kind of makes it easier for man-in-the-middle attacks to occur. For the recommendation, it just says the self-signed certificate. You need to purchase or generate a proper certificate for this service. For the RC4 cipher suites, the RC4, it's been deemed flawed. Basically, within its pseudo-random stream of bytes that are generated, there's a wide variety of biases introduced, and that causes a decrease in randomness. An attacker could actually potentially derive the plaintext if plaintext is encrypted repeatedly. And then if that were to occur, the attacker could basically obtain up to tens of millions of ciphertexts. So it's recommended that the affected application is reconfigured so that the use of RC4 could be avoided, and also the use of TLS 1.2 be considered when dealing with both the web server and or the browser and service support. So And then the last one that I have is the version 2 and 3 protocol detection. Currently, the remote service will accept connections that are encrypted with the use of both of these, but both the SSL versions have been affected by like a high amount of cryptographic flaws. Man-in-the-middle attacks have a higher likelihood of happening, or you can even have communications between the client and service could be decrypted. So, also according to the NIST version 3, so SSL 3.0 has been actually determined to no longer be acceptable method of secure communication. So it's recommended that both of these versions 2 and 3 be disabled, and then consider using a TLS 1.1 or higher instead. Next, I'm going to be moving on to Windows for the HTTPS. So as you can see, the top 5 vulnerabilities also deal with SSL. And instead of going over these in detail over again, I'm just going to touch on the fifth security issue, which is the certificate with the wrong host name, since you did not see that one on the past slide. This is the current SSL certificate. It is actually found for a different host for the service. Specifically, that it has a different common name on the service presented for a different machine. And to fix that, it's recommended to purchase or generate a proper certificate. The last two, these are informational, as you can see by the ringing on the side, and the Nessus SYN scanner is basically like a port scanner that's half open and could help determine which of the TCP ports are actually opened. Although it doesn't really pose a risk factor, it can still leave connections to be unclosed and could also cause the problem to occur for firewalls that are less robust. It's recommended to use an IP filter to protect the target. The last one is the SSL certificate common name mismatch. This is where the common name on their certificate doesn't match up with the host name. And you want to be sure that the users if there are several names on the machine, you want to be sure that those users are connecting to the service with the use of the DNS host name. Moving on to POP3 for Linux. Again, they have the SSL vulnerabilities. These seem to be the most common ones that I ran into. So throughout this presentation, if ever that comes up, I'm not going to focus on them again, go over them again. I'll just skim over them and talk about the vulnerabilities that I have not gone over in detail. So if you just look at number 6 for the SSL certification chain, it contains less than 2048 bits or bytes. According to the standards set by the Certification Authority browser, the RSA keys has to be at least this 2048 or more. If it's not, the certificate could actually either be rejected by browsers or could actually even be revoked. So instead, you want to replace that certificate with a longer key and then go ahead and reissue certificates. Then the POP server detection. This is the scan showed that the POP server is currently listening to a remote port, and the port is running a server across a network link that understands POP. If it's not being used, the service should just be disabled. As I talked about in a previous PowerPoint, Services that are not being utilized should just be disabled. It shouldn't be open on default or anything like that. This is just because if you give someone a wider or a larger surface area to attack, it gives them a higher chance or a better chance of actually compromising your system. So those services that you're not using, disable them and get rid of them, and make your target smaller on your system. Next is the SMTP. For Windows, there's no real pressing security vulnerabilities that's determined with the scan, but I do have the recommendation as far as the Nessus SYN scanner. And again, I kind of already mentioned this as far as the half open and having ports determined that are actually opened, and then using the IP filter to protect that target. Next is IMAP security issues for Linux. All of these I've already gone over as far as the SSL. Most of these could be, or I should say half of them could be solved with the purchase of a certificate, but I'm guessing with this just being a class and not necessarily your actual system, money's not going to be spent on it. So if Samba, there's no vulnerabilities that are found with the Nessus scan. DNS for Windows. So you see that the Nessus scan or an SYN scanner is the first one. Already went over that. The second one is the DNS server detection. This is a server provides a mapping, or the DNS provides mapping between the IPS addresses and host names. And currently on his Windows, the DNS server is on a remote host and listening. So I would recommend that, again, how I mentioned with the security issue with POP3 is it should be disabled if it's not being used, or it needs to have that access restricted to just internal host if it is wanting to be used. Linux, again, the DNS server detection. If it's not being used, disable it. And then Active Directory security issues. You've only seen one of these, so I'll have to go over the remaining four. The first one with the medium ranking is the vulnerability on the SSL version 3. Could allow for information disclosure. So I already kind of mentioned before with that detection of version 2 and 3 is that 3 is not deemed a secure communication. So you need to be sure that certain information, or there is certain information that's missing from the workarounds in the Microsoft Security Advisory, and the client and server software that's been installed can be affected if that key is not applied. Man-in-the-middle attacks are more likely to occur, and this is known as the poodle effect. To fix that, use and apply the client registry key. And then the second one is Microsoft Windows SMB registry. So when log on, cached password weakness. This is the remote host catches passwords locally whenever users log in. Go ahead and go in, and the key value needs to be set to 0. Third one, Nessus scanner. Already went over that. Fourth, and again, as you can see by the ranking, these are just informational, kind of just additional hardening that you can do, or additional things you can do. Microsoft Windows SMB shares access. One or more of the Windows shares can currently be accessed, given if they have their credentials through the network. And this can allow for attackers to either read or even write over data that is confidential. And you just need to restrict access under the Windows. The fifth one is the Microsoft Windows SMB LSA query information policy. Function SID enumeration. So this vulnerability makes it possible for the host SID to be obtained, and the attacker could essentially gain a list of the local users. Anonymous lookups can be avoided by actually setting the registry setting of the restrict anonymous to an appropriate value. Moving on to LDAP security issues for Windows. I've gone over all of these. We have the SSL, got to purchase or generate a proper certificate of the service. Nessus scanner, that's using the IP filter. Yeah, I've already gone over those. Again, the Linux LDAP security issues, went over these earlier. Same, I guess, definition of what these vulnerabilities are, and the recommendations are nearly the same. Database security issues for Linux, none were found with the Nessus scan. And last but not least, the SSH security issues for Linux. The SSH server CBC code ciphers enabled. This is the server currently supports cyberblock chaining or CBC encryption. An attacker could recover a plain text message from an original ciphertext. And the CBC mode, it needs to be disabled, while the GCM or the CTR encryptions, they need to be enabled. Next, the SSH weak MAC algorithms enabled. The server allows for either a 96-bit MAC algorithm or an MD5 to be used. Both, honestly, are both weak. So you want to go ahead and those need to be disabled. That concludes my vulnerability assessment on my partner. And if there's any questions, you can post them below.